Hey friends, we're going to be looking at an article on classroom management. You'll find that article on the same screen as you found this video, so you might want to open the website so you're looking at the same thing that I am. It's an article out of the Handbook for Qualities of Effective Teachers on Classroom Management by Strong, Tucker, and Hinman. Classroom management tends to be an issue for all new teachers especially. A little afraid of it, perhaps, a little unsure of what to do, perhaps. And so this module that we're in is going to help you with that, I hope. And by the time you're done with your program at Point Loma, you'll undoubtedly gain more wisdom about classroom management. So classroom management is, it might be helpful to think of you being a driver of a car in which your students are riding, and you need to get them to their destination. And there's a substantial focus on the mechanics and the rules of driving of the road, but sometimes there's not as much focus on how the automobile functions. And we're going to look at the mechanics of driving the class and the rules for the class. We're also going to look about how to keep the classroom functioning well. As I said before, novice teachers find classroom management an area of high concern. But if you notice here in this statement, experienced teachers feel that way as well. It's not as if once you've got it, you never have to think about it again. It's an issue in the classroom that you have to think about continually. That's why we're starting this whole class on methods with classroom management, because it's going to be one of the most important things you do. There are a lot of issues that come into play that influence classroom management and the way your classroom runs. There'll be school rules, there'll be parent expectations, there'll be student expectations. Your own personality and philosophy come into play. There's a lot of variables. One thing that's very interesting is that effective teachers take time from the beginning of the year, and especially on the first day of school, to lay out their classroom management, organization, and expectations for behavior. This study that was done by Emmer, Evertson, and Anderson, and I actually personally know Dr. Evertson, showed that teachers that spent time on the first day of school going over the rules and expectations and had them clearly defined, 6 weeks later when they came back, the classroom was far more productive than those classrooms where teachers did not go over the rules and procedures and routines. So there's three parts of classroom management that we want to think about. First is classroom management. It's the actions and strategies of teachers to solve the problem of order in classrooms. So that would be sort of how things are going to work, how are we going to interact with each other so that we're all actively engaged in the learning process. Classroom organization refers to the physical environment. And effective teachers organize a safe classroom environment. They know strategically place the furniture and materials so that students are not distracted and their learning is optimized. I remember my first year teaching, I walked into the classroom to get ready and there was this huge pile of furniture in the middle of the room. I had no idea what to do. You're going to be far better off than I was because we're going to talk about that in this module. And then the final element of classroom management is expectations for students' behavior. It's a key element. Effective teachers know that student behavior is more than just about rules and consequences, but it's about the classroom environment and how the classroom environment develops and how students perceive that environment and then how they behave. I know in my experience, I was told that I should not smile until Thanksgiving in the first year of teaching, and that by Christmas I could loosen up a little bit. I did not like that plan, and so I wanted to be the same way every single day, from the very first of the year till the very last of the year, and students knew that and they could count on it. The more consistent you can be, the more controlled the classroom will be in a positive way. So we're going to look at that. The other thing to think about, too, is I really like what Dr. Gibbs says about student behavior. When students are exhibiting any kind of behavior, you need to remember that they're trying to communicate something to you. They may not be able to use words when they act out in a positive way or a negative way, but they're trying to communicate something to you. And if you look for that communication that's going on, what are they trying to tell me? It will change the whole way you look at student behavior. So as we get down the article, we're coming to the part that talks about rules. It's interesting that if you think about it, that everything, virtually everything, that involves interactions among people requires rules. How we drive on the street or freeway, how we spend our money, how we pay our taxes, all of that, everyday life has rules. And it's the same with a classroom. But it's found that in a classroom setting, effective teachers have a minimum number of classroom rules. There's not a certain number, but there's not very many. I would say 5 to 7. And those rules are going to be about how we act towards one another, how we maintain a safe environment, and how we participate in the learning process. You want to offer clear expectations of the rules and clear explanations, and you want to rehearse those expectations with students, if you see here. We just sometimes we assume that students know what we want, but that's not always the case. So I always follow the thought of make visible your invisible expectations. So if I expected students to be completely quiet a certain period of time in class, I would tell them, I expect right now that you're going to be completely quiet. Or if I expected that they were going to laugh and have a good time and carry on during some skit that was going on or something, I would tell them, it's okay now to, and it seems silly to tell them it's okay to laugh and enjoy themselves, but I think they learn to follow what you are asking and what you're expecting by doing that. The thing you want to think about with the rules that you create, that they have to be fair, reasonable, enforceable, and consistently applied. So if you think about a rule about talking, could you have a rule that said no talking? I've honestly had teachers that had that as their rule. And when I talked to them about it, I said, can you go through a day without talking? And they said, well, no, but I don't want the kids to just talk randomly whenever. But then that's not what you said in the rule. You said no talking. So you need to find a way that is consistently applied. So then they said, okay, I'll just say no talking without raising your hands. And I said, well, is there a time that you want them just to have a discussion about a book they read? Well, yes, the teacher said. Well, then you can't have an open discussion where people just talk out without raising their hands. So it's really something to think through. How are you going to consistently lay out rules that can be the same in every circumstance? And then routines. You want to have classroom routines. And here are things that I never thought about when I was a classroom teacher before I started. You are going to be so far advanced compared to what I was. I knew I was really good with kids, but I never thought about how they would enter and leave the classroom, how I'd take attendance, how I would secure materials, what they would do with trash when they had it on their desk, how they should label their work, how they turned in assignments, what safety drills would be like, just all the myriad of things that I never considered. And later in this module, you and your partners, your team, are going to look at that together. So you want to have routines. They have to be a little bit flexible because every circumstance is not the same. So you wouldn't have a consequence if someone did a routine incorrectly. You would have a consequence if they disobeyed a rule. But if they don't follow a routine, then you would reteach that routine. And so you want to keep teaching it until everybody in the class understands. And then the classroom room environment has to do with the physical elements of the room. And there's 3 words I want you to remember: visibility, accessibility, and distractibility. You want every student to be visible to you, and you to them. If you're writing on the board, they need to be able to see that clearly. You don't want anyone's back to you. There's something psychological about when you have your back turned to somebody, you don't think they notice what you're doing as much. So you want to make sure that you can see all students in the face and they can see you. You want to arrange the furniture so that it isn't distracting to students. I had a classroom my first year of teaching that was all windows on one wall, and I put about half the furniture in a way that they were looking out the window. I didn't quite realize that when I did it. And anybody that would walk by, or a bird would fly by, or anything that happened outside, they'd immediately turn their heads to look at it. And so you want to think about that. Also, if you had computers in the classroom in a certain area, you wouldn't want students facing that way from their desks, because the screens might have things on them that would distract them. So visibility, distractibility, and accessibility is the 3rd word. If you want students to use something, you need to place materials in such a way that students have easy access, that they can get them easily, instead of having to climb around a desk or something to get to a bookcase that might have dictionaries in it. You'd put those dictionaries in a place that were easily accessible, if that's something you want students to use all the time. So again, the rules that you're going to have with your students, you need to have those on the first day. I always had a sample list of rules on the first day, and then together we would talk about those, and students would add other rules, or we'd change the rules. But we need to make sure that on the very first day there's a list of expectations. And as you go down the article, you want to read the rest of this. But here's some principles about rules, and there's a list of rules and whether they're clearly stated, reasonable, enforceable, and positively stated. And then at the bottom of this article, it talks about, there's some routines, but then it talks about classroom arrangement, and it gives you some classroom layouts. If you notice, this one sort of goes against what I just said about having their back to you. If you were writing here on the board, if you notice, these 3 students and these 3 students would have their back to the board the entire time. Or if you were using the overhead, they have their back to it. It would be far better to turn the tables to look like this so that everybody's looking forward. So those are just a few tips. You're going to spend the rest of the time in this module talking about those 3 areas: rules, procedures, and classroom arrangement. On the next page of this module, you're going to read an article, each of you, more in depth, and you're going to teach each other about it. So I hope this has been helpful, and you're going to learn a lot, I hope. Talk to you soon.